Have you ever paused, just for a moment, and looked at your reflection, not just in the mirror, but deep within your soul, and wondered, why is it that in today's modern world so full of pressure, judgment, and relentless expectations, some women still manage to walk through life with light in their eyes, steady calm in their hearts, and a quiet strength in every step, while others, just as capable, seem to live in constant self-doubt, trapped behind a mask of pleasing others, tirelessly chasing after happiness that always seems just out of reach? Could the secret lie in a new self-care regimen? A best-selling book on empowerment? Or maybe an online course on boosting self-esteem? It might be tempting to think so, but no. The answer runs far deeper than anything found in glossy magazines or quick-fix solutions. It lies hidden beneath the surface of consciousness, buried in what the renowned psychoanalyst Carl Jung once called the undiscovered self. And tragically, this is where many modern women have long misplaced the key. Jung believed that a woman's journey toward her true self is not an act of rebellion against society. Rather, it's a profound awakening, a reuniting with parts of herself that were never meant to be lost. This path does not require her to discard her gentleness or deny her instinct to care for others. Instead, it asks her to reclaim those qualities, but to offer them intentionally, not compulsively, consciously, not as a sacrifice of her own soul. So what is the secret behind the quiet confidence of some women? What makes them glow with a happiness that doesn't seem to depend on anyone else's approval? In today's exploration, we'll walk side by side into that question. And if you're a woman who's exhausted from wearing masks, from molding yourself to fit in, from hiding your real emotions behind a polite smile, then this journey is for you. Because at the end of it, there waits a version of you, radiant, authentic, powerful, that perhaps until now you were never allowed to fully become. First, the truth you've been looking for doesn't exist out there. It lives within you. Modern culture tells women to look outward, to build a life that appears successful. The dream sold to many is a polished one. Have the perfect career, the sculpted body, the fairy tale relationship, and a life constantly validated by praise from others. But here's the cruel irony. The more women climb toward these ideals, the more they often feel hollow inside. They laugh, but the laughter feels rehearsed. They achieve, but peace never comes. Jung once said, "Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakens." And this is where the truth begins. From childhood, countless women are taught to be accommodating, to please, to smile even when they're hurting. They learn to say yes when every fiber in their body is screaming no. They learn to swallow their opinions, to silence their discomfort, to come last, because that's what a good woman is supposed to do. But what happens when this behavior becomes habitual? Over time, they lose their voice, then eventually believe they never truly had one. Carl Jung called this false self the persona, a mask we wear to earn love, validation, safety. It's not the authentic you. It's a carefully constructed image, built over years of social training, designed to please and be accepted. Yet, when a woman lives too long behind the persona, she begins to forget what lies underneath. She no longer knows what she truly wants, or even who she is. Picture a woman who appears to have it all. A successful career, a stable marriage, the admiration of peers. She's the envy of others. But behind closed doors, she sits alone, crying in the bathroom each night, unable to understand why she feels so disconnected from her own life. Or think of the devoted mother who flawlessly tends to everyone's needs. The house is immaculate, the children are thriving, yet she cannot remember the last time she felt alive, joyful, or simply at peace. These are not just passing emotions, they are signs. Clear signals that someone has lived too long in the external world and has neglected the vast inner realm. And according to Jung, that inner realm is not a place of tranquility. It's a mysterious forest, a vast dark ocean filled with forgotten pieces of ourselves, fragments we were told to ignore, to bury, to be ashamed of. Here lives the shadow, not a monster to be feared, but a reservoir of feelings we were never allowed to fully express. What's inside the shadow? Anger you weren't allowed to show, jealousy that made you feel guilty, hurt that you pushed aside, a deep desire to be wild, to speak freely, to say no without apology. These parts of you were silenced when you were young, called selfish, difficult, unworthy of love. And so you tucked them away. You became agreeable, compliant, good, but in doing so, you dimmed your fire. You never asked us to destroy the shadow, quite the opposite. He urged us to integrate it, because within that shadow lives your forgotten power, your raw life force, the vibrant, unedited, unapologetic you. A woman unaware of her shadow will forever struggle with the haunting question, why do I feel so empty when I have everything I was told to want? Or the painful admission, I don't even know who I am anymore. Jung believed that within every woman lies an original essence of creativity, wisdom, and connection to nature and the mystical. This innate energy, rich and ancient, is not something taught, it is felt, as though woven into the very threads of her soul. And yet, over generations, this deep feminine presence has been steadily silenced. Society, in its obsession with order and expectation, has reduced this vibrant essence to passive roles, ones of service, politeness, and obedience. Picture this, a little girl, perhaps you once, wild and unfiltered. She climbs trees without hesitation, shouts with joy, scribbles fearlessly on walls, and questions everything she sees. Her spirit is raw, real, and alive. But as she grows older, her world begins to reshape her. Those around her begin to correct her behavior, trimming her wings without her knowing. Girls don't act like that, they say, with a tone that carries both disapproval and warning. Is that how a girl talks? No one will love you if you're so stubborn. These phrases are not simple scoldings. They are the beginnings of a lifelong silencing. The divine within her, the voice that once echoed curiosity, boldness, and freedom, is slowly locked away. That sacred voice, the goddess of instinct, creativity, and independence, is now labeled too much, too loud, or simply wrong. Over time, women grow into adults carrying a sense of emptiness, a strange hollowness they can't quite name. So they chase perfection, they chase beauty, they chase approval, hoping it will quiet the unrest inside. But behind the sharp eyeliner, behind the daily ritual of applying red lipstick and stepping into the world, there's a whisper. Soft, but persistent. There's something I've forgotten. That whisper? It's the call of the buried goddess, the one who never left, merely silenced, because no one is born disconnected from their feminine essence. It's coded in the soul, like a quiet lighthouse standing in the dark, waiting to guide her home. This essence is not loud, but it is powerful. Creativity, intuition, gentleness, openness, and connection, all flowing from a single wellspring deep within. Yet as life goes on, this energy is muted by society's relentless demands. Expectations pile up, roles are forced upon her. But make no mistake, this feminine power does not disappear. It hides. It waits. In its place, thick emotional armor forms, shaped by wounds that never healed. These layers are meant to protect, but only end up separating her further from herself. Carl Jung called this disconnection a severing from the archetypal self, the deepest part of your being tucked away in the shadows, hoping to be remembered. Femininity, he explained, is not a surface trait, it's spiritual. He named it anima, the soft yet profound force within that is deeply tied to emotion, intuition, and the unconscious. But for many women, this force is coded in fear, because when a girl's inner world is wounded early, it is this sacred feminine part that is the first to be hidden. A girl mocked for crying, scolded for being too gentle, or shamed for dreaming too loudly, begins to shut parts of herself down. She learns not to trust her emotions. She hides her tenderness. She becomes safest when she is composed, rational, and in control. But that control comes at a price. And what is that price? A fracture from the very source of her vitality. from her natural rhythm, her intuitive soul. Feminine energy is not bound to gender or appearance. It is a sacred force that lives in everyone. It is the part of you that opens your heart to love, that flows with life instead of resisting it, and that gently reminds you, slow down. You are safe here. This energy holds the keys to joy, sensuality, vulnerability, and the grace of simply existing. Still, for countless women, this energy is dimmed from a young age. Maybe you were told emotions are chaotic, or softness is weakness, or that your desires made you unworthy. Maybe you grew up where logic was celebrated and sensitivity was dismissed, leaving you to wonder if your natural instincts were a flaw. As a result, that little girl, the one who once danced without restraint, imagined vast futures and cried freely, began to shrink. She hid her sparkle. She traded authenticity for approval, and strength became her shield, though slowly and quietly, it buried her truest self. Jung taught that the inner child is the origin of freedom, creativity, and the fullness of emotional life. When we lose touch with her, we lose our magic. So if today you find it difficult to relax, to enjoy without guilt, or to express your femininity without fear, it does not mean you've failed. It means you've been surviving. You've been adapting to a world that demanded you leave parts of yourself behind. But now is the moment to return, to find that inner child gently waiting, and let her walk you back to the woman you were always meant to be. Picture a small stream flowing through a quiet valley. Cool and fluid, it winds naturally through rocks and trees. It doesn't force its path. It simply follows instinct. But one day, it comes face to face with a massive boulder. It doesn't know why the boulder is there. It just knows. To keep going, it must adapt. So it learns to slip through cracks, to flow narrowly, to adjust and survive. Slowly, the stream begins to believe that flowing freely leads only to resistance. The feminine energy within a woman is like that stream. Sometimes it flows gently, softly whispering through the stones of life. Other times it crashes with fierce force, carving its own way through the terrain. But always, this energy remains wild, authentic, and ungoverned, an essence that doesn't need permission to exist. Yet over the years, she has unknowingly layered herself with countless rules. She's inherited beliefs passed down from generations that whisper, "You are only worthy when you make others happy." These beliefs become walls not of safety, but of separation. Much like the stream that once flowed freely but now stands blocked by a massive boulder, her truest self can no longer reach the open light. The vital parts of her spirit, her intuition, her freedom, her joy, are trapped beneath those heavy expectations. What happens to a river when it cannot flow? It grows stagnant, its sparkle lost in stillness. To bring back that natural instinctive movement, a woman must begin by creating safety. Not outside, but within. She must feel secure in her body, her emotions, and her heart. And that only begins when she dares to reconnect with the forgotten child inside her. Because an inner child who never experienced unconditional love cannot open her arms to receive love now. She does not trust it. Instead of softening into love, many adult women grow wary, hyper-aware, skeptical. They try to control love, they rationalize it, they analyze it until all magic is gone. In trying to protect themselves, they build emotional fortresses, solid and impenetrable. But what they often don't realize is that these fortresses are also prisons. Behind these high walls, their deepest feminine energy, sensitive, powerful, and wise, remains confined, unheard, unfelt. Feminine energy doesn't come alive through force. It doesn't awaken through trying harder. Instead, it is stirred softly, through surrender, through presence, through trusting, through the organic rhythms of life. But how can a woman surrender when she has spent her whole life afraid of being hurt? When fear sits just beneath her skin, she becomes ever watchful, constantly alert, needing clarity before opening up, needing guarantees before she can trust. And in those moments, she drifts further and further from her own feminine nature, not because she lacks it, but because she was conditioned to believe it was unsafe. dangerous, even. Can you recall a time when you stifled your tears for fear of seeming too emotional? When you silenced your voice instead of expressing your needs, just to avoid rejection? That exact moment, however small it seemed, was another tightening, another closing off of your sacred feminine energy. These aren't random reactions. They are echoes of childhood survival patterns. The heartbreaking truth is that many women believe this is maturity. They think they're becoming wiser, stronger. But in truth, they are repeating what they learned long ago. That vulnerability is unsafe, and authenticity must be hidden to survive. Jung never saw the restoration of feminine essence as a matter of morals or behavior. To him, it was a sacred spiritual calling, a return to your soul through compassion, through radical self-acceptance, and through the courageous work of integrating your shadow. This is what it means to sit with the parts of yourself you were once told to bury. The softness, the sadness, the sensitivity, and to say, I see you. You belong. You are part of me. When a woman does this, she begins to reconnect with the goddess within. And in doing so, she uncovers something ancient and powerful, her intuition. Intuition cannot be quantified, but we've all felt it. A sudden knowing that something isn't quite right. A subtle sense that you're out of place. A quiet but persistent nudge to walk a different path. However, over time, women are taught to doubt this voice. They label it irrational, impulsive, unreliable. Instead of turning inward, they start seeking answers from others, forgetting that their truest compass has always been within. Jung believed that intuition is the very language of the unconscious. It's the bridge between the hidden parts of the mind and the conscious self. Without it, a woman is like a ship, adrift at sea. With no compass to guide her, she might seem composed, even successful, but deep down, she feels directionless. When a woman begins to awaken the primal flow of feminine energy, this sacred river of intuition, vitality, and authenticity, the first emotion she feels is rarely peace. More often, it is disruption. The ground beneath her feels unfamiliar. She is no longer who she was, yet she hasn't fully stepped into who she is becoming. This is the beginning of the sacred journey Jung called individuation. And this process, this path to wholeness, is not about becoming someone new. It's not about shaping yourself into an ideal or a perfect version of what society expects. In fact, Jung warned against that modern trap. He was not interested in perfection or pleasing moral standards. He believed the soul's highest aim was not to become better, but to become whole. True spiritual growth, in Jung's view, lies in individuation, the slow, honest return to your genuine self. This journey isn't about acquiring more. It's about shedding, peeling away everything that doesn't truly belong to you, outdated beliefs, imposed roles, inherited fears. You face your shadow, the very parts of you that you tried to abandon, and you welcome them back as sources of strength. This process brings light to what was buried, the child you once were, the feminine presence that was forced underground, and the moments you were told didn't matter, but did. Individuation isn't about creating a polished, glowing image of yourself. It is a descent, a return inward to your deepest roots. It is the brave choice to meet your wounds, make peace with your past, and embrace every part of who you are, both the strong and the tender, the rational and the intuitive, the shadow and the light. Only by integrating all these parts can you step out of a fragmented life where you constantly try to become someone else and into a life that is truly authentic, autonomous, and deeply meaningful. This isn't about self-improvement in the traditional sense, it's about self-return. Wholeness isn't found in chasing ideals, but in reclaiming every forgotten piece of who you truly are. The wounded child, the silenced voice, the sacred feminine energy. All must come home. One woman, who bravely embarked on this journey of healing and truth, once shared a powerful reflection. For 30 years, I lived as if I were wearing a mask. Day in and day out, she became who others wanted her to be. She smiled when she was crumbling inside. She nodded, even when she longed to scream. She performed a version of herself crafted for approval, until the performance became all she knew. But something changed. When I started returning to the little girl within me, she said, to the parts I was once ashamed of, I realized I had never truly lived a single day. That realization was a turning point, a truth too raw to ignore. Once she touched that inner truth, however painful, there was no going back. The illusion shattered, and while the path ahead was unclear, she knew that pretending was no longer an option. The process of individuation is far from easy. In fact, it often begins with deep discomfort. There will be seasons when you feel utterly lost, not belonging to the world you once knew, yet still unsure of who you are becoming. This in-between space is disorienting, like being suspended between identities, between expectations and truth. It requires immense courage to enter this uncharted terrain, where you must face memories long buried, challenge beliefs imposed by others, and uncover fears that never had names. Jung understood this well. He believed that real transformation begins only when we confront our psychological inheritance, the thoughts in our heads that were never ours to begin with. The critical voice of a parent, the cultural beliefs of a generation, the moral codes handed down like furniture, never questioned, only obeyed. A woman walking the path of individuation begins, piece by piece, to untangle herself from these inherited threads, not to abandon the past, but to understand it, to distinguish what is truly her voice from what is simply an echo. And here lies one of the most difficult truths. The world doesn't always welcome this kind of change. Because when a woman begins to wake up, she also begins to disrupt. When she stops conforming, she holds up a mirror to those around her. And not everyone is ready to see their own reflection. So, resistance arises. People ask questions that sound concern, but sting like judgment. Why are you so cold lately? What happened to the sweet version of you? What they are really saying is this: I can't handle the version of you that I can't control anymore. One woman recounted her own awakening. Since childhood, she had been the emotional glue, the peacemaker in every family conflict, the therapist to her overwhelmed mother, the steady presence for her siblings. But one day her soul could no longer bear the weight of everyone else's needs. She stopped calling every day to absorb her mother's pain. She stopped apologizing for setting boundaries. And the backlash came quickly. Selfish, cold, ungrateful. But beneath the accusations, she felt something she had never felt before: clarity. For the first time, she was living as herself, and though it hurt, it was also liberation. Jen called these powerful shifts confrontations with the self, not for domination, but for understanding, for integration. When a woman no longer splits herself into who I should be and who I truly am, she begins to reorganize her entire inner world. Her values shift, her beliefs are questioned, her relationships evolve. The way she interacts with the world takes on new shape. She no longer reacts automatically. She chooses, deliberately and consciously. Every small, intentional decision becomes a stone laid in the foundation of a new inner home, one that is no longer built by society's blueprints, but by her own design from within. And maybe, just maybe, you are somewhere along this same path. Perhaps you've felt the disorientation of change, made decisions that confused the people around you, or stood in a space between two versions of yourself, wondering where you truly belong. If so, you are not lost, you are in transition. And that is sacred ground. If you feel moved, share your story in the comments. Your voice may echo exactly what someone else needs to hear. It may remind them that they are not alone. This path is not paved with ease. That is why so few dare to walk it. The journey of individuation demands solitude. It calls you to step away from roles that once defined you, and it asks the hardest thing of all: to stand firmly in a room full of people, completely yourself, without shrinking, without shape-shifting, without losing your connection to the truth of who you are. But that very solitude is where inner strength is born. Jung once said, "Loneliness does not come from having no people around you, but from being unable to communicate the things that seem important to you." And how true that is, because sometimes the deepest isolation happens in a crowded room, when your soul speaks a language no one else seems to understand. Individuation allows you to speak what matters, even if only to yourself. As a woman delves deeper into this journey, something within her begins to shift. She starts to see the world with new eyes, clearer, less clouded by illusions. What once seemed like permanent fixtures in life, jobs, marriages, reputations, may begin to crumble before her. And yet she does not tremble. She doesn't fear their collapse, not because she is indifferent or heartless, but because those things no longer define who she is. They were once cornerstones, now they are just remnants of a life she has outgrown. With quiet conviction, she begins to construct a new value system. It is no longer about pleasing others or living by a script. It becomes a life centered on self-honesty. Loyalty to herself begins to outweigh the roles she once played. She no longer chooses people out of fear of being alone, but because they don't force her to shrink or dim her inner light. Isn't that the truest kind of companionship? The one that allows your soul to breathe freely? This freedom she steps into isn't the impulsive, wild-made rebellion of, "I'll do whatever I want." It is deeper, more profound. It's like standing in the middle of a vast desert and feeling no fear, because finally, she knows who she is. There is a stillness, a clarity in such self-awareness. From that sacred moment onward, she becomes unshakable, not because she feels no pain, but because she no longer runs from it. She has made peace with her shadows. Individuation marks the end of an era of living according to formulas, expectations, and the so-called universal truths handed down without question. But more than that, it is the beginning of something quietly beautiful. It is the genesis of your true life, not a replication of your mother's existence, not a polished ideal for public display, but a life authored, one conscious choice at a time. Day by day, chapter by chapter, you write something wholly your own. Number 4. The true source of strength. As a woman journeys deeper into individuation, a startling realization dawns upon her. True strength does not lie in becoming flawless. It lies in embracing all of herself, both the brilliant light and the haunting darkness. Authentic confidence isn't a costume you wear. It's something you carve from the inside out, like a sculpture emerging from raw stone. And this kind of confidence only takes shape when you dare to show up as your whole self, without masks or filters. Far too many women have fallen for the illusion of the ideal woman. That image is not a goal. It's a carefully marketed fantasy, a trap veiled in polished language. The more one chases it, the more disconnected she becomes from her own soul. And then one day it hits her. The perfection she pursued wasn't liberation. It was a cage she built with her own hands. Wholeness offers something radically different. It makes no demands that you fit into a box or perform a role. It simply asks you to be fully present with what is. Whether you are tired, angry, heartbroken, or filled with unnamed longing, wholeness welcomes it all. Jung called this essential process integration, the unification of the fragmented parts of the soul into a cohesive whole. No more hiding, no more stashing fears in the back of the closet, no more fake smiles when your world is falling apart. Jung reminded us, wholeness is not achieved by cutting off a portion of one's being, but by integration of the contraries. You cannot become whole by rejecting the pieces of yourself that make you uncomfortable. You become whole by gathering those pieces with love. Just as there is no light without shadow, a woman who denies her envy, rage, or sorrow only gives those emotions power over her. They slip into the background and drive her unknowingly. But when she chooses to face them, to feel them fully, to welcome them without judgment, something powerful happens. She becomes truly whole, rooted from within. She doesn't conquer her darkness, she transforms it into depth. Wholeness also means reconnecting with the body, not treating it like a project to fix, but recognizing it as a sacred vessel, a temple of memory, of emotion, of life itself. Yet women are constantly taught that their bodies must adhere to expectations, be slim, be desirable, but not too much, be youthful, be pleasing to the world. And in this exhausting effort to fit an ever-shifting standard, they lose the intimate bond with their own bodies. They forget that their body is not an object, it is their home. I see it all the time, women running on treadmills, not out of joy but because they despise the mirror. They starve themselves from a place of fear, not freedom. They paint their faces to be seen not because it brings delight. But what if they paused for a moment and asked, if my body were my best friend, how would I treat her? Would I punish her like this? When you slow down and truly listen to the signals of fatigue, the joy of movement, the natural rhythm of hunger and fullness, you begin to find something precious. Not beauty in the eyes of others, but alignment with your own truth. You begin to feel confident in whatever shape your body takes, not because it's perfect, but because it's real. Wholeness doesn't silence emotions. It learns to sit with them, to honor them without being consumed. A strong woman is not one who never sheds a tear. She is the one who allows her tears to fall and does not equate them with weakness. No need to hide tears. No need to apologize for emotion. She knows that every wave of feeling is part of the vibrant ocean within, and that ocean is her source of energy. She no longer fears the rise and fall of her emotions. Each surge of joy, each swell of sorrow becomes part of the rhythm of her inner world. She listens deeply now, not resisting the tides but learning to ride them, knowing that every emotion carries wisdom, every current has a message. When a woman begins to live in wholeness, the way she moves through the world begins to transform. Her steps become more grounded, her gaze softens, but her presence sharpens. She no longer seeks to impress others, because she understands now that worth is not a performance. She doesn't need to shape herself into something more likable, desirable, or palatable. Why? Because she has already offered herself the greatest gift: complete, unconditional acceptance. And once you have loved yourself that deeply, external approval begins to lose its power. And that energy, the energy of someone who has made peace with herself, is what makes her magnetic, compelling, and truly unshakable. It isn't about perfection or bravado. It's the quiet power of someone who has walked through the fire of self-discovery and emerged whole. This does not mean she is free of flaws, conflicts, or internal battles. They still exist, but now she no longer fears them. She doesn't wage war against her own soul. There is no longer an inner battle to win. Because of this inner peace, she is no longer easily swayed by the need to prove herself. The fear of rejection no longer dictates her behavior. She has stopped bargaining for love or altering herself to keep people close. She knows now that if someone walks away because she lives authentically, they were never meant to stay. And if someone chooses to stay, they do so not because she hides her truth, but because they have the courage to love her as she truly is, in her fullness. Wholeness also grants her a kind of strength that society cannot create. It's not the strength of titles or applause. It's the strength to stand in the center of her own storm and hold herself, to support herself in the rawest, most vulnerable moments. She no longer waits for someone to rescue her or hopes for something outside to patch the emptiness within. She has learned to sit with her discomfort, to cradle her pain gently, not with judgment, not with escape. Like a mother sitting beside a crying child, not trying to silence it but simply offering presence, she learns to show up for herself in exactly the same way. That deep, compassionate self-presence becomes her unshakable foundation. It is the essence of true resilience, not the absence of tears, but the willingness to witness them without shame. Carl Jung once wrote, "Only the paradox comes anywhere near to comprehending the fullness of life." And it's true. Life is not made of tidy, black and white answers. It is not always clear where strength ends and vulnerability begins. It is not always easy to say what is right or wrong, beautiful or flawed. Life is the coexistence of all these seeming contradictions at once. A whole woman no longer tries to resolve these paradoxes by choosing one side. She welcomes them all. She lets them coexist within her, the courage and the fear, the sorrow and the joy, and in doing so, she begins to see the deeper layers of herself. She doesn't need to simplify her truth to make others comfortable. She embraces the fullness, and in it, she finds clarity. Number 5, the power of connection. When a woman steps out of the rigid mold of perfection and into a state of wholeness, something unexpected and beautiful begins to unfold. She no longer sees the world as a stage where she must play the right role to earn acceptance. Instead, she begins to view it as a sacred space, a place to truly feel, to connect, to be. She radiates a different energy, one that doesn't demand attention but naturally draws it through authenticity. And through this shift, she discovers something profound. Her healing is not just for herself. It becomes a ripple that touches others. Her wholeness becomes a door, a passage, an invitation. Others feel it. Others sense it. Her courage to be fully herself gives them permission to do the same. Isn't that the quiet miracle of transformation? That it doesn't end with us, but begins with us. This is when the transformative power of feminine connection starts to reveal its depth. Like the intertwined roots of ancient trees beneath the surface, unseen but unbreakable, women carry a shared legacy. Jung once said that no individual exists in true isolation. Each person is part of a broader tapestry, a collective unconscious. This truth runs even deeper for women, who are connected not just by bloodlines or rituals, but by a shared emotional inheritance, a memory that transcends time. When one woman awakens, when she begins to reclaim her voice and her truth, she doesn't only change her own life, she begins to heal what was broken long ago. She begins to mend the pain carried silently by her mother, her grandmother, and the women before them. That chain of silent suffering starts to dissolve. One woman shared her story. She came from a family where 3 generations of women endured in silence. Each remained in unhappy marriages, afraid to break tradition or disrupt expectations. She was the first to choose differently. She was the first to choose divorce. At first, she felt like a traitor to her lineage, as though she had failed some unspoken duty. But then, one day, she looked into her daughter's eyes, and in that moment, clarity dawned. She realized that her choice was not just for herself, it was for her daughter. It was for the generations yet to come. She realized the decision was not just for herself, but for her daughter, for the generations to come. She had broken a cycle, and in that pain there was liberation. It was not an escape free of consequence. It was a sacred rupture, a necessary unraveling of inherited silence. In that breaking, something ancient and heavy had lifted. Generations of suppressed voices began to echo with newfound clarity through her single act of courage. Women not only suffer in silence, but they also watch each other in silence. The world may not notice, but women are always observing, quietly, perceptively. The way you walk into a room, the way you say no without guilt, the way you refuse to perform a role that no longer fits you. These subtle choices become silent signals, beacons for other women who are still holding their breath, waiting for a sign. You don't need to speak to create impact. Your authentic presence, steady and unforced, becomes a quiet invitation. Without uttering a word, you say, you too can be yourself. It's not about declarations or grand gestures, it's about alignment. When you stand in your truth, you resonate. Carl Jung believed that when an archetype is awakened in one person's psyche, it holds the potential to stir something profound in others. And the archetype of the free woman, unafraid of her own power, unashamed of her emotions, no longer waiting to be rescued, radiates like fire beneath dry leaves. Quiet, invisible, but undeniable. It doesn't need a spotlight. It doesn't seek applause. It is felt. Have you ever met the eyes of a woman who has emerged from her personal abyss? Her gaze doesn't boast. It doesn't demand recognition, but it holds a truth so solid that it stills you. It's not the look of a champion. It's the look of a survivor, steady, unshakable, present. That gaze carries a message deeper than words. I made it through. You can too, and in that very presence, she becomes a flame bearer, keeping the light alive for others still walking through the dark. The community of awakened women is unlike ordinary friendships. It is not held together by convenience, flattery, or subtle competition. It is sacred. It is raw. It is a circle where masks are gently set down, where tears are not awkward but sacred, where truth is spoken not to impress, but to release. In that space, healing does not come in the form of advice. It comes through presence, through being deeply seen, deeply heard, through embraces that carry no conditions, only understanding. One woman shared, I met a group of women where I didn't have to prove anything. For the first time, I laughed without defensiveness. I shared my failures without shame. And just like that, I began to believe that I had the right to be myself. That, in essence, is the resonance Jung emphasized, that no one is an island, but rather a link in a vast spiritual chain that binds us across generations and lifetimes. A woman's soul does not live for her alone. It carries the weight and wisdom of those around her. And here lies the quiet miracle. When you begin to live authentically, you no longer need to chase the right people. You become a living frequency, a clear tone, and those vibrating on that same wavelength will find their way to you. Connection then begins with energy, not effort. You stop clinging to relationships that feel one-sided. You let go of conversations that leave you feeling smaller. You start to recognize that silence is worth more than 1,000 empty words. You begin to choose again, not based on appearances, but based on intuition. You don't select people out of fear of being alone. You choose them because they reflect who you are becoming. True connection never asks you to shrink. It calls you to expand. It reminds you that your presence is enough. And you realize you never needed anyone to feel whole because you already are. But when you stand beside other women on their journeys, something greater awakens. You are no longer just I. You become we. A circle of imperfect, radiant souls who are brave enough to begin again. A community of women who no longer wait for permission to shine. A network of hearts, beating in unison, not to follow rules, but to create new paths. And here is the final, undeniable truth. When a woman becomes free from within, she not only breaks her own chains, she forces the world to question the very system that built those chains in the first place. Her existence becomes disruptive, not because she is loud, but because she is real. Some will feel threatened, some will turn away, but others, many others, will pause. They will look, they will wonder. Could I live like that too? Could I be free? Imagine a small seed buried deep beneath the earth in the dead of winter. It has no flowers, no fragrance, no applause. And yet, in that cold darkness, something miraculous begins to stir. Not an explosion of color, but a quiet cracking open. Not a race toward the light, but a sacred splitting from within. A woman returning to her essence is just like that seed. Each time she honors a part of herself she once rejected, another layer of earth softens. Each time she says, "This is me," without apology, another root pushes downward. She is not rushing toward the light. She is deepening into her being. Wholeness doesn't arrive from chasing after the future. It is born in the stillness of now. In the courage to stand in your own darkness and stay. That silence, the silence of a woman who no longer performs, is the loudest, most powerful voice of all. So, if you're in a phase where no one understands what you're doing, if everything familiar seems to be collapsing while the new has not yet formed, don't be afraid. This isn't your end. It's your beginning. This is the first crack of the seed, and a seed only breaks its shell when it is ready to live. Ultimately, this path doesn't promise ease or perfection, but it promises something far more precious. That you will never again have to abandon yourself just to exist in this world. You will live fully. You will live freely. you will live as yourself. Thank you for joining me to the end of this video on this journey of awakening. If anything I've shared here resonates with something inside you, please consider subscribing to the channel and turning on notifications. You never know, the next video might arrive exactly when your soul is ready to hear it.